Thank you. I'd also like to commend Harwich Fire Department, Orleans Fire Department, and Orleans Police Department, and I hope I'm not missing anyone, but Orleans in particular obviously was inside of the building and found the young man, and the thought of what that's doing to some of those EMTs and police officers is unimaginable to me. But I think we owe a great deal of thanks to our public safety across the board, and to say some prayers for the Orleans Fire Department and Orleans Police Department as well. Public comment and announcement.
Yeah, hello, good evening, Patrick Otten, 49 Kendrick Road, East Harwich. It's my understanding that Orleans Select Board has taken up the issue of registering all rental properties, and I'm curious what the opinion of the board here is, or whether it's an issue you can address and take up yourselves, just to get a handle on the extent the extent of rentals within Harwich and the impact it has on where we live and what we're doing. If my neighbor's renting, and there's 87 cars in the lot next door, what's that impact on the next neighbor? So I'm just curious to know if there's interest within the Harwich community to also sort of follow the lead that Orleans had and begin registering rental properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Good evening, Dan Pelletier, Water Wastewater Superintendent for the town. I'm here tonight just to share some kind words that were provided to our department this past Friday. To set the stage, every 3 years Mass DEP comes out and does what's called a sanitary survey, where they go through all of our pump stations, treatment plants, documentation, the whole department top to bottom. So in following up, they only had 2 recommendations: no violations, no deficiencies. Their 2 recommendations were to install protective bollards around 3 of the wells we have, which are just the cement posts to make sure that they don't get hit with plowing. And the second was to identify a location outside of our Chatham Road facility to store construction and equipment material. The second one's a little bit longer of a fix, but the first one we were able to do right away, and I was following up with DP, and they emailed last Friday, and just to read what they had said. Hope all is well. Warm thanks for the info. You guys are good to go with me, but I appreciate the follow-up. Overall, you guys are very squared away and doing an excellent job. One of the top 3 public water systems I've visited. And you should be commended for doing a lot of the work in-house and not contracting out. I was impressed. So I just wanted to share that and thank my dedicated staff for being the ones to execute on that and doing it in-house.
Thank you, Dan. Great news. Anyone else for public comment announcement? Mary?
Just our committees that are looking for volunteers: agriculture, capital outlay, community center facilities, conservation, forest, cultural council, energy and climate, historic, housing, planning board, real estate and open space, treasure chest, voter information, youth service, and zoning board of appeals. And as we've said, even if your interest isn't on this list, feel free to apply.
Thank you, Mary. Anyone else? Up to fiscal year 2024 comprehensive budget and message. We're going to start tonight with the finance director presenting the fiscal year 2024 sources and uses table. Good evening.
In our PowerPoint, we had submitted one of the forecasts, but unfortunately earlier today when I was balancing different spreadsheets to make sure everything balanced, I found an error in one of my debt exclusion reports. So I'll start with the explanation, and we'll go from there. Okay. So as far as tax levy limit is concerned, the real estate and personal property, this I sat down and vetted out with the assessor, and that's where I discovered that there was an error in our projection for excluded debt. And how we come to the amount for tax levy limit is they take the base levy limit for this next fiscal year for FY '24 would be $50,671,000 and change, plus the 2.5% levy, which would be $1.266 million, plus growth factor of $500,000. So the subtotal would be $52,438,527. Then you add in the excluded debt, which is, got that wrong. Sorry, I had the wrong one. $2,789,152. And then you also add back in the Monomoy School debt service and the Cape Cod Regional School debt service and Cape Cod Commission values to give us a tax levy limit of $57,513,450. So on your revised sheets, that's what you'll see for the tax levy limit. Then I sat down with departments or had conversation with them or emails to talk about the local receipts and get the department heads' input on the projection. So we came up with $14.806 million in receipts. The state aid comes off of the cherry sheet, and that's $766,160. The overlay surplus is, as it has been in historically, $200,000. So the total transfers from other sources is $1.379 million, and that would include, as you've had in the past, cable fund funds, betterment funds, water indirect charges, sewer indirect charges, the Gulf Improvement Fund to pay their debt, and the CPA debt as well. And then there's the overlay abatement. Again, historically, you've always done $450,000. So the net available sources is $73,391,072. The town operating budget was calculated at $30,773,764. And we have some fixed costs that can have fluctuations, such as Barnstable County retirement. That came from Barnstable County, that was a reduction. The debt service, $2.541 million. The health insurance at $250,000. Property liability insurance came from the vendor of $976,060, and the unemployment historically has always been budgeted for $20,000. So the total fixed costs were $12,849,154. So then with the two allocations for Cape Cod Tech and Monomoy, the total uses come to $75,255,321. So right now the net sources is in a deficit of $588,939.
Thank you, Anne Marie. The documents that you're working off of, can we get copies of those documents?
Absolutely.
And that way we can get them to the public tomorrow and whoever's interested in showing the changes. Just comment for myself, it's late in the hour to be getting this change, especially with the now showing a $588,000 negative.
I agree.
As mentioned in the hallway, the difference between budget FY 2023 and the forecast, the 0.4% in the levy limit, I'm not sure how that can be accurate, given where sales are at and given all of the other factors. So I do think we need to do a little bit more work on that and at least verify.
Sure.
And sorry, I'm jumping in front of the board. Forecast on the local receipts, 14,806,962. I guess I'm a little frustrated because this is the third sources and uses form. Joe did his own in the budget presentation. I saw one from you, and now I'm seeing a third one. But the forecast local receipts of 14,806,962 with a 4.2% increase. I think that that's a number that the board needs to dive into, given where we have been with free cash. So whatever backup material you have on that and how we derived at those numbers, I'd like to see. And then what was the number that we reported out to DOR for certification of free cash? Did we have I thought the number was 15.6%.
The free cash was on FY '22, not on.
I mean, not 15%, 15,600,000. And now we're at 14. That 15 million number is stuck in my head. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to go a little bit further. As a matter of fact, along the same exact lines, both on the budget and on this, it would be really helpful if you had last year's budget, last year's actual, and going into the forecast, because it's hard to pin down exactly where we're coming from in order to know where we're going to.
Can we get that
Yes.
as well? I've got some other questions, but I will start with Larry.
Well, I had the same comment Don did. I was looking at the budget, and it doesn't compare last year with this year. You know, it has the department input and the Joe's. So I actually went through and all those spreadsheets, and did my own. And some of these are, you know, catch your attention. Rec is up.
Larry, if we
17%.
could, just for now, we're only
Just
going
for
to
that.
talk about the sources and
Okay.
uses. And then we'll get into the budget after that, after Joe presents.
Okay. Well, the sources and uses, well, I'll get into the budget discussions. That's where my questions are
Okay,
coming forward then.
thank you, Larry. Don?
No, agreed with everything you were saying.
Mary?
My concern was the same on the local receipts and the free cash. I expected to see the forecast for '24 to be significantly higher than that. So I'd like to see more on that, much as Don and Michael have said.
Okay.
Julie?
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm looking for the same information.
And then the health insurance, I guess, is my last question. Is that 6% a fixed number, or is that a guess so far?
That's an estimate.
That's an estimate, okay. Joe, do you know when we'll see the actual on health insurance?
Excuse me, I serve on that group. I believe we have a meeting next week, and we're anticipating a number less than 6%.
Okay, thank you. If you could get us those documents, I think you'll probably stick around for the budget presentation, but if we could start with those documents to the board tomorrow, then I can get them released to the people in the public that want them. I would only say to the public, we're about a week early on this. We have to deliver it to the Finance Committee by, I believe, the 21st. So this is a moving target at this point. There'll be some other edits. This is not a final version of this, I don't believe, and not a final version of the budget. Turn it over to the town administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening to you, members of the board, everybody assembled, and those watching at home. In a minute, you'll see on the big screen a PowerPoint that I've put together that will cover some of the highlights, if you will, and then certainly get into specific questions on the document that you have in your packet. So, Mr. Chairman, as you said, it is my requirement, but I also consider it a privilege and an honor to be responsible to develop a comprehensive budget for fiscal year 2024 as my role of town administrator, and to accompany that with a budget message which you have in your packets. And as you've indicated, the charter requires the town administrator to deliver to the Board of Selectmen no later than the second Tuesday in February a comprehensive budget and budget message. And then, as you've indicated, Mr. Chairman, the board then must, with or without amendment, turn a budget over to the Finance Committee, and we can get into some of those dates. So first, with any good presentation, here are my mistakes. And I want to thank Linda Sabula and others for reviewing it over the weekend. The number you see up on the screen is the number that's reflected in the sources and uses that was just presented by the finance director. and it is different from the overall number that I gave in the packet, and that is simply because I did not check a formula. So I am presenting you with an operating budget for the departments of $30,773,764. And as you've seen overall from the sources and uses, that'd be part of an overall budget that comes in at $75,255,321. I've also been questioned about what appears to be a difference in the formula. And so it is not a difference in the formula, but if you look at that second bullet point, in the budget document that I provided, there is an OFIS or other funding uses or sources line. And what I was trying to present is a document that is going to look like our typical Appendix B in the warrant, and that line is not provided there. So that number is the $1,819,823 that you see there. It was not highlighted in the operating budget because it is not an operating budget item. Rather, it's transfers that we make from the general fund that impacts the bottom line. So I can show the full spreadsheet that has that dollar amount encoded in it, but it was not presented because it's not part of my operating budget presentation, which I'll get into now. So the slide is a little bit outdated, obviously, based on the new numbers we heard for net available sources. So what I'd like to emphasize this evening is relying upon that document, I had presented you with what was then a balanced budget. And that is obviously a requirement and an obligation of mine. And so as we suss through the numbers that the finance director has mentioned, you will still have a balanced budget that you'll be handing over to the finance committee. So what I wanted you to see here is the difference between the operating budget, which supports all of our departments, and therein all of our programs, as that compares to fixed costs, as well as the two school districts. Now, for each of those, Mr. Chairman, as you've indicated, some of those fixed costs include health insurance, which has yet to be formally provided. There's also numbers in the sources and uses that tie back to what we get from the governor on state aid, and all of that is still in flux. But we have what I would consider to be solid forecasts based on what we're hearing from all of those groups. Similarly, when you look at the budgets for Cape Tech and for Monomoy, these are draft numbers for them as well. As you know, they have required processes that they have to go through, similar to what we're doing this evening. We have heard from Mr. Sanborn that on the Cape Tech, we expect that 3.6% to go down because they are expecting to rely upon their excess and deficiency to reduce the overall assessments to the member communities. The situation with Monomoy might be a little bit different, where that the 4% right now is the number that was presented to the school committee at their last meeting. However, we don't know what actions, if any, the school committee is going to take. Now, Mr. Chairman, as you know, we have Dr. Carpenter and Mr. McMillan from the Monomoy School District coming before you on February 28th. So they'll be able to do a deeper dive on that school budget. So I've said every time I've presented you with a budget that a budget is a statement of priorities. And what has been prioritized in this budget are the following: enhancement of services beyond normal operational budgets. So when I say normal operating budgets, remember that we have actively been negotiating with our 8 collective bargaining associations. So there are cost of living and step increases that were factored in. The departments are responsible overall for accounting for fuel budgets and things of that nature. So those are all factored into the standard bottom line of the operating budget. These columns get to enhancement of services. So these are for that I included. And then in the next slide, you'll see the ones that I did not include. Now, I will just put out there that it is very simple to cut a budget. You know, the finesse and the difficulty comes in when you start to prioritize and have to make choices over the others. As I wrote in my message to you in my memo, these enhancement of services dovetail with the priorities that I'm presenting to you tonight, and that is operational enhancement in administration, fire department, building department, and community center. There was also a commitment in recreation, but given some personnel cost changes that were there, those recreation program enhancements are actually, are able to be assumed by the present budget that the rec director has. So when you see recreation, know that aside from the seasonal number, which I'll talk about separately, there is additional programming in there. And that is Mr. Beebe responding to my directive to see if we can enhance programming for families and youth. And so you can see in my budget documents as well as here what these enhancements get to. So for administration, it is, when I say new hires, I want to be very clear, it's new hire onboarding. It is not that we're bringing in new hires in administration. So that is the HR cost when we bring in a new employee. So there were costs such as background checks, health checks, things of that nature that were never actually accounted for in the budget, so we want to account for that going forward. And then the other part of it, so anytime you see reference to new hires, that's what that's getting to. The step advancement is department heads are always looking for an opportunity to recognize exceptional service. And one of the ways we can do that in the collective bargaining agreements is to grant greater than a one-step increase. But I didn't want the departments to have that burden fall on them, so the additional funding would reside in administration, and those are meant to fund exceptional performance that the department heads have seen from their direct reports, and so we would support a more than one-step increase if presented. And then training, development, and development is exactly that. You've heard me say many times that I want the town of Harwich to be an employer of choice. That's one of the carryovers that I brought with me from the private sector. And an employer of choice for me is somebody where people want to go to work, and we retain people that we brought in that were good. And you do that through step advancement and also training and development. The bottom line for administration is the $50,000 is meant to enhance the programming that we consider to be human resources. The fire department is seeking 4 new firefighters. I want to put it out there because I know Chief LeBlanc's listening. They're not specifically just firefighters. There are firefighter paramedics versus firefighter EMTs. But I know we'll have more time to go in depth on what that request actually gets to. And the $70,000 is on the expense line, and that is the onboarding cost. So any of the academy costs, same thing, onboarding new hires, things of that nature. For the building department, this is a proposal that was developed by our building commissioner, Jack Mee, but it's not solely for the building department. There are elements within this that are meant to also help the planning department and then by extension, our community development operation that we have. So the first part of that would be to take our building inspector from part-time to full-time. The zoning administrator is a contemplated new position, and Jack can speak broader to that than I can, but essentially we would be looking for a person that supports both building and planning, and more specifically the zoning board of appeals and the planning board for a lot of their materials, permits, and documents. And then last but not least would be a zoning board of appeals clerk, and that is really for someone to make sure that we're tying back to zoning board of appeals meetings, meeting minutes, decisions, as well as the same for our historic district, historical commission. So I now see that that should be HDHC. So I'll correct that as well. And then for the community center, this is actually a hybrid. These are the total costs in support of the community center, but these costs impact upon both the community center budget and the Department of Public Works, because Carolyn has laid out a very cogent argument, and one that I support completely, for not an enhancement of programs, but returning our program levels to pre-pandemic. And so these costs would help us expand the building hours to 9 p.m. as they were during the week prior to pandemic, and also have building coverage on the weekends. So to do that, we need a custodian for the evening hours during the week, and we would need to cover overtime, and the numbers for the custodian and overtime were provided to me by the DPW director. And then specifically for the community center, for Carolyn, there would be a program specialist too to oversee those programs. And again, the effort here is to bring us back to pre-pandemic levels of what we enjoyed before the pandemic came on and disrupted the programming at the community center. So then, these are enhancements that I've endorsed and incorporated into my budget presentation.
Joe?
Yep.
1 second, Don?
Sure.
Before, through you, Mr. Chair, before you skip this slide, the fire department, regardless, even if they're paramedics, you divide four and even to 190,000 with salaries and benefits, how does that work?
It doesn't.
So what the chief has, for that one, the $120,115 covers 2 firefighter EMTs, 2 firefighter paramedics.
That doesn't.
I believe he has factored in the overall funding for that. If you give me a moment, I can try to pull up the Munis report that
So
shows
this
that.
is partial funding then?
Say again?
The enhancement is an add-on to other funding to get to that level then? Because I don't see that we could hire anybody at 40 grand with benefits.
I'll defer in the long term to the chief, but I can do more digging on that.
Yeah, and that's a question, Joan. I don't know if you want to make notes now, or that's one I wrote down, but if you divide 120 by 4, it's $30,000 a piece. It should be $54,000 a piece, plus benefits. And I know we don't always list benefits under these requests. And then the 70,000 would be for turnout gear and equipment and training. So you're still, no matter what, taking, if that's the real number, 121.15 divided by 4, and it doesn't work.
I was being gracious at 190.
Mary, go ahead.
Maybe it's a timing issue. Maybe he's not planning on having them for the full year. Don't know, just throwing that out.
Yeah.
So if you want to give me a moment to get the backup, I can do that. Otherwise, if you want me to come back to it later.
I think you can come back to that
Okay.
later.
Thank you. Any other questions on this slide before I move to the enhancements I did not include?
I guess, Joe, the only other thing would be the community center, and you mentioned $55,856 is for the custodian services, and you used the word overtime. So to get a program specialist, we're looking at $44,499, but then we're gonna pay $56,000 roughly in janitorial services. So I guess I'd like to see the detail on that.
Sure.
And then the only follow-up question would be, if we were open in the community center prior to the pandemic, and we're trying to get back to that, did we lose a body? Or did the cost of doing business just go up where we have to add $45,000?
If I remember correctly, we actually lost a position. So we lost a position and did not fill it. And we had both custodial services, which we do not presently have, and staff member.
So if we can get those clarified,
Mhm.
please?
Yep.
That's all I have. Anything, Larry, on that?
No, that's fine.
Don? Mary?
All set.
Julie?
All set?
Thank you. Go ahead, Joe.
So these are proposals that were made that did not make it into my budget. And as I put in my memorandum, I wanted to emphasize that not being included does not mean it's not worthy. Again, when you build a budget and you have limited resources, you need to make priorities. So what you're looking at there is add to staff and a staff upgrade in assessors and enhanced GIS. Now, I think, if memory serves correctly, the GIS might already be covered under the IT's budget. So that was one of those items that carried over in Munis. So that may come out anyway. But the $43,711 is to bring the staff to a level that our interim director of assessing is comfortable with. And one of the factors that I brought to bear on not including that, Mr. Chairman, as you know, we have funds available through an appropriating article where we're trying to come to bear on assessing. So at this point, it's not an enhancement that I would add, because we have other funding sources that can impact upon the operations there while still accomplishing the goal of the tax title and all of that we've been working on. Conservation is a sigh, not just because she's in proximity to me, but this has been an ongoing request. But where I have commitments to community development related to building and planning, I thought it was too much to add this. We may be able to rely upon the new staff that we have to provide some coverage, but this was our conservation administrator looking for someone to provide support to her department, and it is certainly needed. There is growth in the operations there. But again, the priorities that I've outlined before are why I've precluded this. The cemetery request, this was actually enhancement of services that was requested within the DPW budget, but it is in support of the cemetery operations. This was meant to be a cemetery maintenance employee. And so the dollar amounts between that and the custodian are nearly similar. And Mr. Chairman, going back to your earlier question, the overtime was simply to cover Saturday and Sunday hours, and the budgeted amount for that was $6,000. So given that there was already a request, I made the decision to prioritize the DPW request, but for custodian, not for cemetery staff. And then finally, a request of our Cultural Affairs Director for a part-time administrative staff. Again, not that it's not worthy, and there is the ongoing issue that I have of single-person departments where they do not have administrative support. So it is an issue that I'm aware of, and it is something I'd like to correct, but at this time, that's not something that would be factored in. Any questions on that?
Joe? Not Joe. Larry?
Thank you, Joe. And we do have a meeting coming up, I think, the first part of March with the department heads and so on.
Correct.
I would like to leave the conservation as open-ended at this point, because that's small change for all the, they're getting busier and busier, as you know, as we get more concerned about runoff and wetlands. And so I think I'd like to bring that back as part of that discussion, see if there's any way. It's $70-some million. This is a small change to critical functions getting heavier all the time. I respect where you came from that, but I'm concerned.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would hope there would be this exercise, and, you know, this is me trying to start a conversation, and, you know, what we should end up with is a budget that we all agree are the best priorities at the time for the town. And I've encouraged all of my department heads, again, to be at that March 4th event for just that purpose. And that's why I wanted to make sure I had language in there as well, so that we can have a deeper conversation about that. The only other thing I would add in real time tonight is, if that sources and uses information is accurate, you're gonna see far less enhancement of services coming from me to get to that, you know, surplus budget.
Don?
Now, speaking as the other Larry, I agree with, I agree with the conservation agent thought is kind of really important because we're growing and we're growing in the sensitive areas.
Mary?
This is not my usual tack, but I'd like to add something. I think we've gotten large enough that we really need an HR director. I don't know what that costs. It's probably the 75 to 100,000, but I think we're too big, and I think it takes away from what you need to do and what Megan needs to do to have you in all of that. So I'd like to squirrel that in somehow. That's a technical term, Anne.
Julie?
No, I agree. I've been looking to add a HR person for a while, so I think it's money well spent. I know it's difficult to talk about that when we're trying to figure out the sources, et cetera, but I agree with that. And then, of course, the other ad is going to be, and I have to work with you, I've got some new information on the early childhood stipend, so that's another one.
Thank you. Joe, comments based on those comments?
No, Megan and I have talked about administration. We've talked about the fact that the personnel bylaws for years has the role of personnel director. I think in the ATA job description, it says that if there is not a personnel director, it's the ATA. So that sort of tells me that this is an idea that may have been around before. And so for Megan and I to account for the expenses and the importance of that, I would not dissuade the member from dissuading me. And it is certainly something we can dive into. And I think generally speaking, the salary range that you were at is probably where we would end up. Whereby if you had an HR director, it might be on the very low end, I think would be 75. I think the high end would be just under 100,000.
Joe, you had 2 members that supported it and a third that will support it. So why don't we add that into your budget?
It being Human Resources Director?
Yeah, rather than come back on March 4th, but let's make that $588,000 negative number on the bottom slightly bigger. If it
Somebody
is,
mark tape, please.
if it is,
So noted, thank you.
thank you. Moving along.
So then what I really want to get to after that, and again, this is including our discussion about sources and uses, but I would be remiss if I didn't remind everyone of the strong financial position that we do presently enjoy. And, you know, as you can see right there on the slide, I want to point out that not only did we retain our AAA bond rating right out of pandemic, but we have strong reserves. Not only that dollar amount that you see up there, and that's fiscal year '22, so our number's gone up even more beyond that. But as you may recall, we also brought online, effective July 1 of '23, 2 special purpose stabilization funds dedicated solely to wastewater and housing. And so, you know, that just enhances our strong financial position because we're taking funds already available and putting them there for those special purposes. And with any stabilization, it requires a 2/3 vote of town meeting. So only 50 to get it in, but 2/3 to get it out. And then, as you can see here, it's not the best slide, I apologize for that. But you can see that our total receipts have grown, and these numbers, I chose fiscal year 2006 to present, because that was the last substantial change we had in our financial position, meaning that was when we adopted the Community Preservation Act and had that as part of our total receipts and revenue streams. So what you can see there is, to me, a gradual increase over the years in our receipts, despite that precipitous decline in state aid. As you see on the sources and uses, we talk about, you know, we're getting $760,000 from the government, and we have to pay them $825,000. And that is a phenomenon that was striking to me when I moved to Cape Cod, because I can assure you, on the other side of the bridge, many communities have very robust state aid numbers. To see that discrepancy. So we have solid receipts with stable growth, despite strong declines in state aid. And that's just the overall why I remain convinced of our strong financial position. So with that,
Larry?
Joe, I can remember actually when state aid was positive in Harwich.
so there was a time.
It wasn't that long ago when it was positive. Just generally, as I mentioned, started on the budget. I was looking at more of at your budget numbers, so comparing last year to this year, and did use some of those numbers just myself on a spreadsheet. And you know, you have you're showing 5.6 increase overall, which is greater than we've done in the past, but we live in inflationary times, so we're going to have to live with some greater going forward. So that doesn't concern me as much. But I would like to, and it's a good start on your budget, by the way, but where you have the differences, say rec was 21% and looking at others, community center, you know, you've started giving that explanation, but I'm hoping that you'll break that out in more detail in the future of what the what is causing that increase, and what we have to do with it.
Joe, do you want to respond now?
Sure. My first answer is relying upon data that I'm not 100% comfortable with right now in Munis, meaning when I was working with the department heads, there were some enhancement of services that carried over from fiscal year '23 to '24. I think we've backed those out. There were some enhancement of services that were baked into the department budgets that were actually capital. I think we've removed those. So Anne Marie and I got together this morning. We're talking about that. So my goal is to have rock solid numbers well before your meeting on the 21st. In the meantime, what I did is I compared the fiscal year '24 requests, both the department requests and what I ended up with to our adjusted 2023 operating budget. So you may recall, if you go back to Article 4, that was $29,115,995, but we had special town meeting, so it went up by about 80,000 because that was surveyor and salary increases for managers. So I was comparing it to the original budget number. We know that budget number has gone up, but I don't want to rely right now on that revised budget number until it's been vetted a little bit more. Therefore, I do expect the percentages to actually be lower than what we're showing now. But in an effort to be conservative, wanted to compare it to the lowest number we had out there.
Go ahead, Larry.
Well, thank you, Joe. That's actually, Joe, more explanation than I really
Sorry
cared
about
for.
that.
It's a good start. My point is, it's just a start right now. And if we're going to get through this town meeting, we need to better justify, or not better, we need to justify why, because these increases are, some of them are 16, 17, 18% increase, which is, we need to justify. We need to, that may be the wrong word, but at least explain of where they're coming from when we have the discussion. So that's my going forward. As I said, at this point, it's a moving document. I'm okay with that. It gives us a starting point. My other comment on the budget is, when you look through I don't see a category in here for the 204 Sisson. And where does that show up? Because when you look at the financial reports we get from Wendy, it doesn't show up in our expenses and revenues from there. When I request, I did get a separate document of that, but shouldn't that show up in our overall sources and uses, or at least the budget number?
So if we don't rely upon the revolving funds for our sources and uses, and I think that's where you see the solid report on 204 Sisson would be the revolving account, but the operating expenses are built into predominantly what is in there for building maintenance under DPW. So if you're looking for a specific report, that would be the revolving fund report. That's separate and distinct from the operating budget itself.
Which I did get for 1 month, but I'm just surprised it's not more open, not as part of the overall explanation that we get.
I can make sure those are updated. I know they're supposed to be quarterly, but.
Yeah, okay. And otherwise, you've given us a good explanation on I was also trying to figure out what the zoning, specifically what that was. I know we want to change, hoping to bring some zoning articles to town meeting, but that's separate from that. That's supporting the ZBA primarily. And you need both the zoning, forget the title, and a clerk at the same time? Is that duplicative, or you need both of those?
The explanation, and again, I'll have this in advance of the March 4th roundtable, but the zoning administrator is meant to be a higher level resource for both the building commissioner in support of the zoning board and for our town planner in support of the planning board. So one of the things that we've seen, in those two departments is with departure of staff, with moving of staff, we haven't had anyone identified to really draw the line between the decisions that are being made. So that's not really something that we would want the building commissioner to rely upon. We'd want a staff member to do that. And it's, really meant to capture the three regulatory boards, zoning board, planning board, and historic district on the administration of it. And so that's why when people come in, it's the point of contact to walk them through the permits, the decisions that were made, and all of that. The clerk is because we've got two clerks right now in the building department, and they're at 100%, well, no one's at 100%, but we'll call it 90% capacity for their building work. We are struggling to find support for the administrative of the zoning board of appeals, meetings and agendas and packet material and HDHC. So the administrator is the day-to-day input, the clerk is making sure the minutes and the meetings go off.
And
Jack Me has a much better explanation of that, so I'll incorporate that going forward.
And my last comment is the program help for the community center. I'm very much for that. My hope is that that's broadly defined to help work with the Council on Aging and the library as well, since a lot of those programs cross over. I know, Emily, you know, I brought this up when you were council on aging, that they already do a lot of informal activity and try to support each other. But I'm hoping that that will be definitely part of that position to make it more formal.
All set, Larry? Don?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Same basic comments I had to Anne Marie. I don't really care, I mean, whether we do, because we're in 23 now, so we haven't finished it, so I don't care whether it's an actual year-to-date expended in 23 or all of 22 showing up in these categories, but it's hard to make an assessment about where we're going with anything, percentage-wise, without that and without an actual number for the receipts, too, because I'm not sure, I'm with you, I don't think that those numbers are right. I don't think we're underwater by that much. And we were both aggressive in prior years about overstating the receipts. This is kind of like a little too much.
Agreed. You all set?
Yeah.
Mary?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add other than I look forward to getting into more detail on these, which will be primarily March 4th, correct?
Well, if I heard you correctly, we're gonna project a human resources director within the administration budget. So, and again, your role is, with or without amendment by the 21st, to vote to send it over to FinCom. So we'll add that while we're updating all of the numbers we just talked about.
Okay.
Is that accurate to assume? To
Yes.
add that HR? Yep.
Yeah, we can always vote it out if we
Right.
get to that point. But that is something we've talked about for years, and I think it's time to put it on the table. Julie?
I have a question on, with the town engineer, salary and wages, it's 176,277. I'm just wondering, in terms of, we're hoping to hire a town, are those numbers just based on us using the outside consultant?
That line item is meant to be reflective of the present grade and step of the engineer in the SAIU contract, plus 2%, plus 65,000 for the surveyor that town meeting voted back in October, plus 2%.
Okay.
So, sorry, that was a long way of saying, no, that's not what we're spending for the firms, but that is meant to be two individuals' true salaries.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate
Thanks for your patience on that.
And no, I, go back to the HR person and of course the early childhood education. I understand where you're going with the zoning. It does make a lot of sense. Chatham's structured like that, and they have somebody who's dedicated to the building commissioner, the zoning board, and works with the historic people. And there's so much going on in all of those boards. And then to make sure that all of that gets enacted the way it should be, or if somebody has a question and is looking for some zoning help, rather than have to go back and forth, and, trust me, I've been there. There needs to be somebody dedicated to that, so I think that's a good expenditure. But I look forward to getting more hard numbers and sources.
So the intent, Joe, will be, I'm gonna set aside a fair amount of time for board discussion on the budget on the 21st, because we are gonna turn it over, not in its final form, to FinCom after that night, and then dive into it on March 4th. If we could have for the 21st, or anything that you could get ahead of time, but I'd like to know actual revenue, where we're at today, with kind of a snapshot on how year past looked at what we took in for the second half. Departmental turnbacks for the last couple years, so that the board can understand what parts of what budgets aren't being used and given back to, as turnbacks. And then significant budget transfers. I know that this year we did several large transfers, I believe, to the DPW for the dump, and how that falls into your budget. Have you accounted for spending more money at the DPW this year, so we're not having to do a large transfer at the end of the year in your proposed budget? And I know we've talked about this, but we've talked about taking a hard look at what we're doing over there and why we're taking trash from Provincetown to Yarmouth, and buildings and boats and docks and anything else they can get in there. So as much of a number as we can get so the board can make a decision on that as well. Albro House, you put in the Albro House expense of 5,000 and the old rec building expense of 6,500. If there's any revenue that goes along with that, those two numbers, I'd like to at least see it. And that's all I'll saddle you with tonight.
I'm sorry, you said Albro and?
Albro and the old rec building. You have expenses in there in both those buildings. I'd like to get an idea of what revenue is coming into there. Obviously, there's no revenue on the department head that's in there, but we do rent space in the Albro House.
Thank you.
Larry?
I want to regress, if that's the right term, in the sources and use question. On the insurance liability, is that increase in their fees, or is that an increase in what we're insuring?
So
Pulling
property,
in the old rec
yeah.
building into that, or something else going on?
Property and liability insurance, that 4.9% increase, that's a solid number that we got from Maya right before the MMA conference. And so the 4.9%, we were originally told to budget 6%. The relief that I felt, minimal as it was, but if you remember the Maya presentation, they showed what others were budgeting for, and they were over 5%. But that is a solid number that we know will carry us through the fiscal year.
Based on the structures we have now?
Correct. Yep.
That was my question.
All set. Don, you all set? Mary?
Yep.
Julie?
Yep.
Anyone in the public want to speak on this? All right, we're good. Moving on.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, just a final word on that. Just again, a reminder that we have the, what I'm calling the round robin, the round table, the big budget meeting, but Saturday, March 4th, I believe it starts at 9 a.m. and weather permitting, and really hoping the weather holds off and helps us out with that. That's meant to be a deeper comprehensive dive. So whatever numbers you give me on the 21st, we will build the budget books based on that and send it out to every member of the Finance Committee, Board of Selectmen. The department heads will have it. So we'll have the songbook, so to speak, well before March 4th, so that we're all operating on the same information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board's all set?
Yeah.
Good. Don, if you're going to read the consent agenda, that's changed.
June 30th.
Consent agenda?
I'll make a note of that after I make the motion.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the Board of Selectmen meeting minutes for January 17th, 2023, and January 23rd, 2023. B, approve the following committee appointment for the Harwich Accessibility Rights Committee, HARC. Donna Richardson with a term to expire 6/30/23. And I'll wait for a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, on the agenda that people would have seen online, this would be an example of how we got into this problem in the first place, because it's not 3 years from the time you appoint somebody, it's whatever the balance of the term is that's available for the position. So that change in the motion aligns it with what has to happen in the term.
I'll comment.
Trust me, if you get to the point where we have to go backwards again and realign all of the appointment dates, it's a real problem.
It's nice Ellen's still watching out for us.
Yes.
Larry, go ahead.
Well, Don, you didn't have to bury me on this. Just a short comment would be enough.
I don't ever want to go back there
I
again.
was, yeah, it was my mistake. Unfortunately, Ellen is still helping us out, and she corrected it.
Just last comment, there was a second appointment recommended, but it was a little too late for the packet. Alexa Page will be at our next meeting, a motion to put her on HARC as well.
Good.
So, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. New business, education on fertilizer. Three department heads.
All right.
You almost had a fourth.
Just for the public, this came up, we took up fertilizer about a month ago and promised to start working on education, and it was sent to your departments, and thank you for being here tonight. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Katie O'Neill, Health Director.
Amy Usowski, Conservation Administrator.
Dan Pelletier, Water Wastewater Superintendent.
Sean Fernandez did intend to come this evening, but he unfortunately had a family issue that came up. We did present a memo for the board on what we've been working on. Happy to answer any questions.
Start with Larry.
I thought it was an excellent memo, excellent approach. I think education is a key. We did that a few years ago, well, maybe more than a few years ago now, and sort of tried to pressure the commercial guys come in and go through the training, and we got some homeowners, and I think everyone saw a result of that. And we need to do that again. I think it was great approach. It's going to take some time and some organization to get the right, because you're going to have to do it multiple times to have an effect. And you're going to have to follow up with some website or some handouts or something to keep it going. But it's a great approach. It's well done.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We used to do it, and now we have YouTube available to us. We never had that before, so I'd love to be able to see something constant, like Larry's suggesting. The only thing is, I want to make sure that we reach people, and if YouTube is out there and everybody's like, yeah, I saw that 2 years ago, it's not helpful. I'm not sure what the mechanism would be, but when people sell their house and a new person buys it, whether that's through the clerk's office or whatever, when they come in to register, it might be nice to have a welcome package that includes that, because I've had this conversation probably hundreds of times with people where they say, that's okay, well, I'm just watering all these perennials and everything. No, it's not okay, because you're standing on the water and they're puzzled, because most people come from an area that's got a reservoir of some sort, and it's a distinct thought, and they have sewers. They have to understand the ecosystem better. Especially with the migration, we're getting retirees and everything. It's really important somehow that we find a point in time. Maybe it is, like I said, maybe they come to register to vote and you give them a welcome package, but something that's comprehensive enough so that they understand that this isn't the same place as they moved from.
We could, just spitballing here, but we could certainly include something that when we have new water customers, property transfers, we typically send out a welcome packet on behalf of the water department. It's probably appropriate now to also have it come from the water wastewater department, and we could certainly include a pamphlet, linking to the short videos and certainly update when relevant new information comes out.
Excellent.
Mary?
I think it's great. I think you've got a pretty comprehensive list of things you're doing, and while I understand what you're saying, some people just don't want to know. So you've made it available, and those that are going to care and actually read it will know, and there are just some that you're not going to reach. So I accept that, but that's a great project. Thank you.
Julie?
Well, thank you. It's a great memo, and other than putting like a police officer at the Agway saying, I don't really know. I think this is the best way to go about it. And the only comment I had was because maybe also incorporating the high school kids too, just to try to educate them at that level too, because they bring that home and they're kind of more environmentally aware than a lot of adults. So maybe that's good to include them in that too. So, thank you.
Dan had another idea too, if you want to.
Yeah, sure. So it kind of came up at last
spit
Friday's
all in
department head meeting with Sean Fernandez. I thought, well, we have this beautiful new tank we built on Lothrop. Why don't we make that an example of how the Cape Cod lawn should look with the, we could reseed it with, seed it as the clover, the natural fertilizer, rain barrels. We could try to make that as an example, cataloging and noting what we're doing so that anyone who wants to replicate that on their lawn could do that. I haven't had an opportunity to run it by the Water Commission, get their approval yet. This just kind of came up last Friday. But just getting the basics out, nitrogen, phosphorus, which one's nitrogen impacting saltwater, phosphorus impacting freshwater, and then just trying to lay out a roadmap for people to get on board with.
Larry?
Follow-up comment. It wouldn't hurt to have something in here about irrigation. Because that's, for me, is a personal pet peeve, is I'll see people running the irrigation systems in the daytime, for instance, when they're all on timers. And also, if you're worried about leaching, you can, that's a factor as well, if you're over irrigating and pushing, leaching it further down. So maybe part of the training, education would be at least that discussion.
Dr. Katie, if you wouldn't mind, would you just touch on the 4 bullet points so the public can hear them?
Sure. So we've decided to develop a series of educational short videos and then advertise those videos at Board of Health meetings, conservation meetings, wastewater meetings, golf meetings, hopefully Board of Selectmen meetings, and potentially town meeting. Hold a public informational and educational session with the Barnstable County Cooperative Extension, which is a really great educational tool. Conduct golf course education turf tours, and potentially in the off-season offer home visits to individuals by the golf superintendent. The town is incredibly lucky to have Sean Fernandez. He's one of the turf experts, if not the turf expert on Cape Cod. Everyone comes to Sean, so we're really fortunate to have him on staff. And then finally, to create educational materials for residents on fertilizer use, what to look for when you're hiring a professional, how to choose specific lawn care products if you're not going to hire a professional, certain alternatives to traditional planting materials, and what questions to ask either your professional or when you're in Agway or any of the stores.
Thank you, Katie.
Hopefully, we do plan on doing a flyer that will go out in the next few weeks, too.
Thank you very much. Anyone in the public with any questions or comments?
Hello, Patrick Otten, East Harwich. I'm happy that you're here presenting your broad perspective of what needs to be done, but I'm really concerned that the objective of education, what is it? Is it just to explain the current practices, or is it to explain the sensitivity of Cape Cod's future? Is it simply to continue the practices and habits as usual, in which they are now the source of our pollution, the
Patrick,
nitrogen?
I'm going to stop you for 1 second. I'm going to let him answer a couple questions because I don't want your questions to get lost.
Okay.
Who wants to take a stab at the first and second question? Amy?
Well, I'll take a stab at part of it. I think the answer is both, Patrick. To your question about current practices versus, or education people, what we should be doing. I'm gonna have to repeat it though, because I had it in my mind and it's gone.
Repeat the question, please.
Yeah, so I'm just worried about, is it just reiterating current practices, or are we now focusing on the future of Cape Cod and a sensitivity? Is it practices as usual, which is the source of our current nitrogen and phosphorus pollution on our seashore and ponds? Or are we going to be more sensitive to the environmental ecology, suffering the cyanobacteria blooms, the loss of shellfish, loss of eelgrass, et cetera?
Okay, go ahead, Amy.
I think it's more towards the latter, and not the existing practices. Practices have changed a lot in the past just few years. Products have changed, different types of plant material, and that's kind of where my big part in this is choosing plant materials, grass seed mixes, native flowering plants to go into your landscape that don't require any nutrient input and very low water usage. So because we recognize that our past and current practices are impacting our water bodies and our, just like quality of life in general here is kind of why we're here. But if people, by the same token, we don't have a ban, so if people want to do things, what's an environmentally better way to do it than going out and buying a bag of fertilizer and just spreading it from Agway or a company? So what are better practices if you're going to do it?
That's where it should be. We should be looking towards the future.
Yep.
And not on the current practices, because we're in trouble right now with our environment. So, good. And this impacts everyone in Harwich. It impacts the residents, it impacts the businesses, it impacts our visitors. If we lose our water, our seashore and our ponds, why are we living on Cape Cod? We need to look to the future and solve that problem today. All right, so that's my input for this. And
Thank
I'm
you.
very pleased that this group hears that and they're focused on that as well, so
Thank you,
thank
Patrick.
you. Good.
Anyone else in the audience? How would members of the public reach out to you to be involved in this? So at the meeting that we had several people from the Landscape Association and residents that wanted to help with the educational part of it. If they want to help, how do they get a hold of you? Just call your department?
Yeah, and I would say any one of us,
Okay.
and, you know, we could meet with the person and see what they have to contribute.
Yeah,
so.
fair amount of them did a fair amount of research, and they want to be involved. I've been contacted since that meeting, asking when we're going to move forward with this, so they can help, so.
I'd be a little hesitant to have individual businesses involved where we don't necessarily know their qualifications per se, but I'd be happy to have them involved and invested. But personally, I'd like to stick to make sure that we know that we're using science, evidence-based members.
Agreed. All right. Any further questions from the board?
No, good
No
job.
further
Thank you.
questions from the public? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Update on opioid funding.
You can leave that, Dan.
No, you can't hide, chief.
Not getting out that easy.
All right, we have 3 more introductions to make, so.
Oh, Sheila House, Director of Youth and Family Services.
Still Katie O'Neill, hopefully.
Gilmet, Chief of Police.
Sue Giselle, Harwich Town Nurse.
So we did create a little working staff task group over the past few weeks since the county originally came in and did a presentation for your board. We've met with several large stakeholders on Cape. I kind of broke down in the memo. We identified goals, we met with the various stakeholders, and we did come up with a final recommendation. It did change briefly today that we just got an email. The school found a great prevention program that they'd like to train 3 of their staff members. That would be around $700, so it wouldn't actually change the funding too much. Our proposal would still remain the same, but with that one addition.
Larry?
Well, we all know it's desperately needed with all the pressures and what we see going on. I know, Sheila, you mention this all the time. And as some of you know, I'm involved with Outer Cape Health, and that's one of their big priorities, major priorities this year is working with all you folks and trying to staff up some more help as well. So just hope you success. It's a well thought out program, and it's always funded. It's also good to know you're finding some funding for it. So that helps as well. But you know, we're back to the fertilizer discussion at some point. How do we engage the community to be sure everyone's aware of it and there's help available? So I look forward to some more discussions on that, whether there's more public meetings, discussions. Be great. But thank you for stepping up.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hate to even have to ask this, but Sheila knows I go way back in with kids' issues. So, when are you planning on introducing this coursework to kids? What age?
Oh, for the high school? Grade 7 through 12, because we've been getting a lot of data about how kids are starting to pick up substances in 7th grade.
Yeah, I'm really concerned that the bus has already left the station by then. I mean, because a lot of discussion about some of this stuff happens in early middle school. So if the object is not to treat opioid addiction, but to explain how insidious it is, how it could be a real problem for the rest of your life, earlier the better. Especially with the way that cartels are now dressing up fentanyl with brightly colored pills and everything that look kind of like candy. I don't want them finding out through experience what it is you're trying to do through education.
Well, some of what's happening too is that there's going to be people with lived experience coming in to speak to the kids directly about how they got on the ramp to addiction, and that'll be happening during this school year through the Recovery Build program that I helped pilot 4 years ago. So
I'm still begging for the middle school.
yeah.
Mary?
Thanks. I had the pleasure of being the liaison to this group, and it was a pretty impressive crowd around the table, so thank you so much. Do I recall that the money has to be spent? Isn't there a deadline, and are we good with that?
As of right now, the end of the fiscal year, it has not been extended yet. We're hoping it will be, but as of now, it hasn't.
It has not, okay. And are we able to implement these? Okay. You're a great team, thank you.
Julie?
Well, this was great and very comprehensive, and the only question I had was this Navigator program. Sounds excellent, but in terms of working within the town so that people can talk to, where do you see that happening?
So our thought was probably at 204 if we can make the room, but that, we could certainly have a further discussion if a better location was identified.
Okay, no, that's great. I was just trying to get an idea of how that would work, so thank you, and this is great.
Yeah, great work. We need to take an action to approve the spending. The only thing I don't have, and I would ask Anne Marie, if we've vetted this through the finance office to see if these are permissible uses. I know the last one we voted on these funds really didn't fit into the criteria allowed by the state. So if we don't act on this tonight and you vet it through the finance and make sure that it's doable, is it okay if we voted on the 21st?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mary? Any further questions?
No.
You all set, Julie?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Larry?
No, just.
Anyone in the public?
good luck
Sharon?
with it.
Sharon Flieger, Harwich. I'd just like to add to what Don said. My feeling is, and I know some parents here on Cape that have had some of these issues. 4th and 5th grade is not too early. It is not too early. If you're only looking at correcting a problem after it starts, you can start at high school. If you want to stop it before it starts, you need to be hitting 4th and 5th graders. And I'm obviously not going to put names in, but I know people that have had issues with children at that age group being approached about drugs. So I just want to back Don up on that. I think we need to look at that as well. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I was just consulting with Katie. I think that this training program for the staff covers K through 12. So, yeah,
Great.
that's what Stacy said to me.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have it back on, Joe, on the 21st for a vote. And we do want to vet that with the finance director to make sure it's,
I made those notes. Thank you.
thank you. Conduct the second reading per Board of Selectmen policy on policy development to amend the Board of Selectmen policy on remote participation.
Skip
C.
one.
Oh, I do that every week. Vote to appoint a member of the Board of Selectmen to the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board of Trustees. So, Selectman member, any recommendations, starting with Mary?
I would like to recommend Larry Ballantyne take the role on the Affordable Housing Trust.
Are you okay with that before I go on to board members?
I am.
Okay.
You know, obviously, I'm a short termer this time, so there may be some advantage to that, and calm the waters and help out.
Okay. Mary?
I was waiting for a second before I said why.
Oh,
Don, second it? Why?
Okay. I think that what Larry just said makes him the perfect person for it. He's going to be here 4 months. He's probably one of the most gentlemanly men I know. I think he will do well. And I think it's good that it's a 4-month, kind of get things calmed down and move forward.
Okay. So there is now a motion and a second. Julie, discussion?
no, I think it's a great idea.
Don, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Anyone opposed? Abstain? Everyone was aye? 5-0?
I'd like to strike the gentleman from the minutes.
All right, now we're doing the second reading as previously mentioned. Do you have that, Don? The reading that you had done? looking,
Do not.
give us 1 second on that. I'm scanning my packet.
I have it.
Yeah, it's in the packet, but it's not
It's not where it was.
it's not a yellow line version.
Yeah, that's why I can't tell you what lines were changed.
It's number 2 and 6.
Here it is, right here, Don. That's what we changed. That's last week's packet.
So, as Mary said, I invite your attention to item 2, beginning with a member of the board. The last section of it will now read, shall notify the Information Technology Director and Channel 18 Station Manager for remote GoToMeeting/Zoom Teams access in a meeting room at least 48 hours prior to the scheduled meeting. And then dropping down to item 6 on the same page, the yellowed out version that we're changing is the last portion of this, the second sentence. If circumstances warrant an extension longer than 3 remote participations per year, yellow begins then. The chair of the board, committee, or commission must grant such extension.
So that is the second reading. Any questions or comments? Larry?
None for me, no.
Don?
I think it takes the bureaucracy out of it, it's the chair of the committee. If they can function that way, it really should be up to them anyway. I mean, everything doesn't have to come through us.
Agreed. Mary?
Nope.
Julie?
None.
Okay, do we vote now to adopt the policy?
Good, on the second reading. I'd move that we accept the changes to the policies as outlined.
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 5-0.
Policy on policies.
Yeah, thank you. E, Herring River Route 28 Landing Stormwater Remediation Project Design, John Rendon. I feel like we should build another harbor out so we can see you more often.
I don't want to go through that again.
Me neither.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, John Rendon, Harbor Master. As the memo in your packet kind of outlines, this really is just to let you know kind of, well, I'd like your permission to move forward with this, but the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, APCC, is an organization, state organization that has received some grant funding. And so they're looking to, they went around boat ramps throughout Cape Cod to evaluate their conditions, looking at trying to remediate stormwater runoff. And so as the memo states, Herring River Route 28 Landing scored very high in their evaluation criteria because of its location within a salt marsh. And so they put together, they selected like 20 sites to come up with an engineering design plan to try to retrofit some of these landings to address the runoff. And so for Herring River, they're going to put together a project that includes construction of shallow bioretention and wet swell forebays, regrading and resurfacing some of the parking lot with permeable pavers and salt marsh restoration. They have an engineering company that they're utilizing for this work. It's grant funded, so we'll have a design ready project that at the end of this that we can then utilize to go and get permitting and construction to do the work. So there is no cost associated with any of this engineering design work. And frankly, there is no obligation on part of the town to follow through and actually do the work that's being recommended. I think there's some opportunity potentially to do some of that work, either through additional grant money, as I outlined in the memo, through the EPA and coastal zone management that I think will be helping to fund some of the construction projects on this. Or we have a couple of other projects that maybe we can piggyback on to do the work. So really, this is informational for you to know that this is coming up. and to request your permission to move forward with APCC to do that design work. If you have real technical questions about it, Amy is hanging out here with me, and same thing with Heinz Proft. They're involved with this project with me, and then I know Dan is here, and I appreciate him hanging out because he's got a project that's going on to run water lines on Route 28, and he's going to be doing some drilling at the landing, so there might be an opportunity to piggyback on that. But really what I'm looking for is, one, to tell you we've been selected and get your permission to continue to move forward with APCC.
Thank you, John. You had me at free. Mary?
Well, it's hard to argue the location needs help.
It does.
You know, not only the wetlands, but it's a rough current going there, as anyone knows. I'm amazed people put boats in and out of that ramp, actually, but yeah, go for it.
Don?
I agree with you.
Mary?
Michael stole my line.
Julie?
Same. I'm a lover of free.
Joe, do you want a motion on this, or are we good with what everybody said?
I'm good with everybody said. I just want to say that no financial commitment does not necessarily mean free, but no financial commitment is good for me.
Don't spoil it, Joe. We were doing so good.
I'm in budget mode.
Proceed.
Okay, thanks
Thank
very
you,
much.
Joe.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. And, thank the other two department heads for sticking around for that. Town administrator, oh, no, Keno. So,
Mr. Chairman, if you'd like.
go ahead, Jim.
So you see in the packet, we received a letter from the Massachusetts State Lottery Commission whereby they are in application from the 7-Eleven Food Mart, which is at 711 Main Street, and that operation is seeking a Keno license. And as you'll see in the letter dated January 27, 2023, the Board of Selectmen, as the licensing authority, is the entity that they would be looking to hear from if the town objects to the application. And as you can see in the letter, there's a requirement and a process by which you would go through if the town had any objections to the application.
Thank you, Joe. Anyone on the board object to the license, starting with Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't object at all. As a matter of fact, my store for 10 years had lottery, didn't have Keno, but it had lottery. To my knowledge, unless somebody really messes up on something else that we license, the Board of Selectmen has never gotten involved in agreeing or disagreeing with the placement of Keno at a particular location. So I would urge us to not say anything and just let the application go through, because there are also moral turpitude questions that they're asked at the Lottery Commission, so that they have to answer anyway in terms of who has ownership, what money do you owe to people. That's far beyond us.
Larry?
I can't add anything more than what Don said.
Mary?
Likewise.
Julie?
I have no issue.
Okay. No issues is the note on that, Joe.
Thank you.
Town administrators report?
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to report, I have no report.
Selectmen's report? Larry?
Nothing to report, survived the cold weather.
Yeah.
Nothing froze, and I'm connected to the sewer on a personal basis, so. There you go.
Nice.
All right. Don?
It got cold and it got much warmer. I was going to report.
Mary?
I don't have anything.
Julie?
I went to the school committee meeting Thursday evening, and I will just say that, you know, the budget is comprehensive, but there's a lot of discussion items there. There's some ESSER funding for some important positions that we need to just take a close look at, et cetera, so just throwing that out there.
Okay. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to what Julie said, and I know that Mary's been involved in this too, before her, Stephen. Is there any way we could urge them to not have their budget presentation in, say, a Thursday afternoon packet that we have to discuss on a Monday? Because history indicates that it is going to be a real daunting, delayed, deep, dense place to go to, and we never have enough time to be able to say, you know, what about page 3 of your presentation? Yeah, so if and when they vote, can we get it sooner rather than later, before the packet even, and then put it in the packet after that?
Joe?
Yes.
Can you ask Dr. Carpenter for that? Because they've already presented to Chatham, so it's available.
Okay.
Mary?
And along those lines, we've asked the last couple of years, the 4,500-page presentation is lovely, but we'd like a 1 or 2 page with a couple of years of actuals, last year's budget, this year's budget.
More along the lines of an executive summary.
Exactly. I mean, the detail's great, but it's nice to have a start point. And the other thing, while we're on this topic, I don't know if now is maybe the time, or maybe it's after this budget season, we really ought to look again at the formula for the middle and the high school. We always said once the elementary was resolved, which it is, we ought to look at that. And I don't know how to start that, but I'm happy to be involved in it.
Go ahead, Don.
Just to your point, because that was an issue, going back to Stephen, bless you, that it was stated back then, the elementary school kids are gonna age up in the same proportions that they are disparate right now. And so the problem inexorably becomes a problem of the middle school and high school, because those kids just keep going up in grades, and we have not addressed that issue.
Something to bring back soon. No selectmen's meeting next week. We will be taking the week off. Next selectmen's meeting is the 21st, correct, Joe?
Correct.
If the board members could send their budget questions, not all of them, but as much information as you can get to the town administrator through Danielle ahead of time, he can come with answers rather than him leave with 30 questions and no answers.
Okay.
So please send your comments to Danielle for Joe. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0.
You should have taken the under.
I always take the under.
At 7:45, look
Yeah.
at this.
Let's do